Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Prose Notes. This is a graduate writing podcast. My name is Samantha Demmerle. I am the Assistant Director of Graduate Writing and Support at the KU Writing Center. I'm joined by my friend and colleague and graduate student.
I'm Nolan. And I'm a graduate consultant here at KU. And so, this is a new kind of project that the two of us are undertaking together.
There are a lot of these podcasts out there, and most of them are dead or they have very slow release schedules. So I think we're hoping to revive the niche, revive the genre.
Revive the niche, but also like kind of carve our own, because it seems like we're very interested in what it means to be a graduate student and what that looks like, but then also kind of trying to tie that together with what it is to work and live at a writing center.
Yeah. Prose Notes. We're trying to think of this as a space for us to discuss how graduate school informs the writing we do and how the writing we do in graduate school kind of informs the way that graduate students move about these spaces and think about the work that is building up their scholarship. I think we're going to spend some time talking about kind of our backgrounds in both of these topics. I have my PhD. I graduated from Indiana University, Bloomington in 2021. And so my role here is to give graduate students the knowledge and confidence and strategies to make sense of graduate writing. And that's really how I want to think about the work I do and how I've been trying to build my career. But writing centers are a really good space for that because writing centers are kind of where we see the most innovation and coolness in universities, I think.
And so maybe off that, maybe tell me, I guess, because I don't even know the whole story, just how you got into working in this kind of space. I know you worked at one at IU as well. Maybe be good to hear that kind of history.
Yeah, so I've been always kind of in the humanities sphere for the entire time I've been in school. Went to Ohio State for undergrad, worked at the Writing Center there, started in very much the same way that many of our consultants do, where they're like, I really like writing, but I've never
English major.
English major. I was an English major, and I really liked writing, and I wanted to help people with their writing, but I, like many of our consultants, had never used the Writing Center before, and very quickly just fell in love with the work. At Ohio State, it was a little bit different than what we do here because undergraduate students could work with graduate students on their work. So I was working with PhD candidates on dissertations. I was working...
That sounds intimidating.
But it was wild, and it was really fascinating as an undergrad because, people who were in their 30s and late 20s were trusting me with their writing, and I felt valued, and I felt like what I was doing was important. So when I got to grad school, I didn't work at the Writing Center there for a couple of years, and then basically after I felt like I had gotten settled, I started working at the IU Writing Center, writing tutorial services, and it was a very different space, but it was still the same kind of work and the same kind of dynamic. And it actually wasn't until I was at IU where I started feeling like the Writing Center had become my community and that I was meeting all of these great friends there. At that time, I had also been exposed to writing groups and other types of graduate programming that I was so excited about because these were new ways of engaging with writing. These were new ways of engaging with colleagues. And at the time, I was still writing my dissertation, which was very staunchly on Shakespeare. Had nothing to do.
That will come up later,
Yeah,
I promise you.
Absolutely. We'll talk about Shakespeare. But no, I was still writing this dissertation that had nothing to do with my writing center work. And then basically there was one day where Harry Denny from Purdue University Writing Center of the Purdue Owl.
The famous owl?
Yeah, the famous owl. He came down to IU and had a talk with us. We discussed data analysis. We discussed kind of writing center administrator work. And something clicked in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, oh, I want to do this. This is the type of work that I want to do. This is the type of career that I want. It literally took me being in a room with 3 writing center professionals to be like, oh, this is a real thing that I can pursue. And so that year, that month, I went into my advisor's office. You know, my advisor was a Shakespearean scholar. She was very staunchly of the academe. And she was so excited when I said that I wanted to go into writing center work, mostly because it was a sad jab at the job market.
The institution of academia. Yeah.
The institution of academia.
The professoriate.
Yeah, she was very excited because she said, oh, you are going to get a job as opposed to some of your colleagues who are going to be on the job market.
Impoverished postdocs.
Yeah. So she was excited in that regard. You know, I was excited because it finally felt like I was making a decision for me. Being a professor had always been the expectation of getting an English PhD. I think that's true for a lot of people. And I don't slight anyone for wanting to do that. It's a really cool gig. However, for myself, I always felt like I was trying to force a square peg into a round hole. And I kept thinking throughout my grad school that well, when I become a professor, I can do it this way. Or when I become a professor, I can do it this way. Even though I knew it was going to be an uphill battle every single time. And that in many situations, those actually weren't choices I would get to make, depending on if I got a job, where I got a job, what kind of institution it was.
Yeah, what the climate's like there.
Yeah. And
yeah, it's one of those things where it sounds like you could make changes from the top, but do you think you're able to make more changes then in the role you're in now? Or I guess maybe changes is the wrong word, but have that impact?
I think my happiness right now and the thing that I find very valuable about the work that I do at the KU Writing Center is that I'm not making big top-down effects on the institution, but I am helping so many graduate students. And, I think there's a lot of value in trying to think big and trying to think about what kinds of programming can reach the most graduate students. But the relationships that I'm building with students, I think are really, really valuable to them. I guess I'm tooting my own horn. I shouldn't.
I think you should. You're very good at your job.
Thank you. I hope so. But I do think that there's a lot of value in a more personal approach to this type of work. Historically, graduate school was we talked about this the other day. Graduate school was an apprenticeship, and so I'm not saying I'm replacing advisors. I'm not saying that I am your new master and you're my apprentice, but I think that having that more personal relationship with students is really, really valuable. Knowing that they're in labs with busy PIs, knowing that they're in courses where their advisors, are very research heavy, so they don't necessarily have time to give them as much feedback or as detailed a feedback. And so I feel like my job and my work is valuable because I can fill in these little gaps. I can kind of fill in these little holes here and there that round out people's experiences in graduate school and hopefully remind them that they're important people and that they deserve the kindness and the consideration that they should be getting.
Well, and just institutions are really hard to change. And that's a thing that, in as much as it comes up here, I will harp on because they are hard to change. And you can talk about it's a good thing that it's hard to change institutions because it means a person can't kind of come in and just change them however they want. But that also means they're really slow to respond. So, yeah, I think it totally makes sense to kind of focus on that, like, relational aspect of the work. I think that's a really powerful way to kind of to achieve that kind of goal.
Yeah. What's your story,
What's
Nolan?
my story?
Yeah, what's your story? I just spent 5 minutes talking.
No, and I think that's wonderful. What is my story? So I went to Truman State in Missouri for undergrad. I did Russian and linguistics. I came in a physics major and changed to linguistics the first Monday of classes because I decided I hate calculus.
The first Monday of classes?
The first Monday of classes. I had a class at 5 p.m. I also had an 8 a.m. calculus class, which was my own fault freshman year. But yeah, by Tuesday, I was in Russian and linguistics, so kind of that language overlapping space. People don't know what linguistics is, and that's okay. So always been in that language space, but kind of in a scientific way, in a way that English folk are often not. So, how do we put words together? What do words mean? Why do they mean what they mean? And these are still things that I kind of like to ponder a lot. I don't get to do as much linguistics work now. But after Truman State, I went to Ohio University, not the Ohio University. I went to Ohio University in Athens, did a master's of applied linguistics there. So I taught language online for 2 years to students in Korea and China, which was a really interesting opportunity. And so there, I engaged in some language, I guess I would say corrective practices. I had to grade their writing, and I had to be harsh about it because they had to be the top tier. It was a very competitive somewhat international school. And so I engaged in a lot of language practices that were not necessarily what I was learning in the classroom, but just was the nature of the contract we had with those institutions. But yeah, a lot of practices that I don't know that we would do here at KU. And so then now I'm a doctoral student here at KU in the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies program. I always forget the whole acronym. I just call it ELPS, and it's easier to remember. So I'm in the ELPS program here at KU, interested in organizational sociology, kind of how institutions operate, why they look the way they do, how we interact with institutions, why they're hard to change. But yeah, so I've worked at the Writing Center. This is year 2 now. This is the start of year 2. I applied because I needed money.
That's absolutely fair. We should not shame anyone for wanting an on-campus job because they need money.
I got a GTA opportunity in the spring through my department, so that was nice. But the very first semester on campus, I didn't have as much money as I would have liked. And this was one of the jobs I saw when I was looking at like KU employment opportunities that didn't seem miserable, but also, again, being involved in linguistics, being involved in kind of that very scientific understanding of reading and writing and what language is, it felt like I could apply my skills there in a really interesting way. And then again, having that kind of applied background of actually like teaching language. And that's not what we do, but it is related.
Yeah. Totally.
And so, yeah, I got the job and I started and I learned a whole lot of things, which we'll cover in this podcast. But yeah, it felt very immediately like home. It felt like a space where I could kind of not throw my weight around, but be part of that community, use the skills and the knowledge I had acquired in a really productive and meaningful way. And it kind of launched this project, research projects that we've got going on now. Like I've kind of moved into the space where I think I want to be a scholar of all the wonderful stuff that we'll be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe that's a good transition into kind of the meat of this podcast. So I want to talk about why we're doing this. I want to talk about some of the topics we're going to cover. And, this is graduate writing is a topic that continues to evolve, continues to change. I mean, just this year, ChatGPT has become a hot button topic for.
It's ruined our lives. Not quite.
In a very funny way, it has ruined our lives. It has not ruined our lives yet, but there is still that possibility. But yeah, sort of exploring how graduate writing affects us.
What even is it?
What even? Good question. What even is it? But yeah, so what writing centers are? I think this is a space for us to talk about how writing centers can support graduate students, how writing centers are in many ways not designed to support graduate students, and kind of maybe some opportunities for us to brainstorm and think about like what else needs to happen, but also the many facets of graduate writing that you experience talking to students, that I experience talking to students. I think this is a important topic to discuss fully. I personally, and this we kind of mentioned this earlier, I think that part of the reason I wanted to start this podcast was because we often think about, especially like writing center outreach as being something that can be very practical. Like, I'm going to tell you tips and tricks on how to write X. And I think that's valuable, but I also think that those tips and tricks are intimately connected to too many other things for it to immediately click with people. When we think about the process of writing, it is so personal and it is so nuanced that I think this space is a really good opportunity for us to say, yeah, we're going to talk about abstract writing today, but also get a space to talk about why abstract writing is hard and why abstract writing is
and
weird.
What do they do? Why do we have them?
Yes, exactly. And so I think this is why I wanted to start this podcast. Nolan, I feel like you were just like so excited when I suggested this idea.
I just love to talk about things, and this is a really great opportunity to just sit and talk about things.
Sit and talk about things.
But I mean, even related to that kind of, you're also involved in the coaching aspect of things.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a really cool thing. I can't speak to what other institutions are up to, but this idea of, it's not just about the writing tricks, it's this whole student that we're trying to see and reach. And that's part of, too, what I think we are trying to accomplish here is understanding, yes, reading and writing so much more than lots of other skills are relevant to what it means to be in graduate school. But we're all individuals with our own goals, aspirations, hobbies, and we'll talk about our hobbies here. I think this is a really good space to humanize the graduate process, which can at times be a very crushing, not humanistic endeavor.
Yeah. Graduate students should have hobbies outside of the university. I feel that very strongly.
It's so good. The things I enjoy the most in this world, believe it or not, are not graduate school.
I guess this is a question, and we can explore later in the podcast. We can talk about it a little bit now, but why did you go to grad school?
It's actually not that long of a story. I would, there's the part of me that is critical of myself that says, oh, I'm just scared of entering the real labor market. But no, I like to think about these things. I like to think about things in an academic way. I'm sure that comes across in lots of the combos that we've had. And just so having that opportunity to rigorously academically pursue my interests is a thing that I value. And I think graduate school, if you like those kinds of things, can be really worthwhile. The production of knowledge is, in my view, one of the most powerful things humans can do and engage in, and we all can. But to have this organized institutional way to learn and produce knowledge is really, really interesting. And the fact that we communicate across space and time, and we'll talk about why writing is so powerful for that, I think is really interesting. I also love to tell the story. I was 5 years old. I learned what a PhD was, and I just wanted that. I knew I wanted... When I was younger, it was about having the title ahead of my name. Now, I don't even care if anyone will ever call me that. That's not what it's about. It's just about completing that degree. But I heard what it was. I understood the concept in a childlike way, but knew I wanted that. And I didn't really care when I was young what the topic was. Now, of course, I do care about kind of what I'm learning about. But yeah, it's just kind of always been this lifelong goal since I was 5 years old, I was like, I'm going to get that one day. And so here I am.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think it's so cool that kids want to be scholars. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's so exciting when I learn that there are children out there who understand that learning is important and want to do that for a really long time. My story
I was going to say, do you want to?
Yeah, it's real quick. One day, a professor in undergrad was like, "Hey, you're really good at this. Why don't you go to grad school?" And I said, "I don't know what that is."
You achieved my lifelong goal as a bit.
Really? Of the professor saying you're really good at this?
It's more than that.
Yeah,
and I don't think you would have completed it if along the way you didn't realize.
I really, it really wasn't. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I think that's true of many graduate students. I
didn't.
I didn't know what I was getting into when I started graduate school, and I, for all of its faults, loved it.
Yeah.
I really, really like thinking. I like learning. I mean, my joke with my partner right now is that, I watch shows and have to stop myself from analyzing them. Like, stop myself
my
from
poor girlfriend.
Yeah.
I talk about things analytically, and she will also do that and is very capable of that. And that's one of the many qualities about her I appreciate. But yeah, it's like I can't turn off that academic switch at times.
Yeah, and I think that's fun. I think that's valuable. I think right now I'm very much in a mindset of I'm glad that that's not connected to my work. I think that's the scary bit. That was the scary bit for me in grad school was that, oh, my intellectual abilities were connected to my value as a person.
Yeah, and I guess I hope, to our audience out there, I hope that kind of lends us some credibility. We've approached the reason for coming into graduate school from vastly different perspectives,
Absolutely.
but still can wind up at this kind of same place of analyzing and understanding what's happening here. And so, yeah, it's kind of like there's tons of reasons people get into grad school, and we'll
so
talk
many.
about those later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. One thing that we can talk about now, since this podcast is kind of an intersection between both writing center work and graduate writing, I think we decided that we want to talk a little bit about the KU Writing Center and kind of what our philosophy is, who we are, what we do, all that good stuff. So, Nolan, do you want to go ahead and maybe list out the goals that you pulled from our website?
Yeah. So, again, apologies if this is a very dry.
This is going to be dry.
Analytical way of looking at these things, but I think
make it fun. Make it fun, man.
A really valuable way to analyze institutions, or one of the few ways you can analyze particular institutions like this one, is just to look at the goals, and you can say, are we achieving those goals? And maybe that's a harder question to answer, but at least it tells you what we're trying to accomplish. And so I actually just went to our website, writing.ku.edu, go check it out, and tried to see if we had a mission statement. We did find it eventually, and so it's at the bottom, but
it's a little hidden.
It was a little buried.
Which is a problem, but
is a thing that hopefully this podcast will uncover, and we can kind of improve. But anyways, so what quote? What's this first quote? It's a place for productive talk about writing with trained peer consultants to help you brainstorm, draft, or edit your writing project, and so writers can learn over time to become better writers. And I kind of highlighted that last bit, and I think that is what it is about. That's kind of the message I heard from the moment I came in the door. Is it's not about being correct, right? It's about writing. It's a process, and you as a person are engaged in this process, and that means we can improve at the process, and we'll never be perfect at the process, no matter how good we are, whether you've got 100 articles or none. You can improve on your writing. And I think that's a really valuable way to look at writing. Again, in academia, I think there are those out there who think they've reached the mountaintop. But for us, the mountain is eternal, and maybe that's intimidating, but if you're a person who's motivated to go to grad school, you probably like a challenge, and there's always that next thing to work on. And I really like that mindset. It kind of helps me it could be intimidating, and I guess it is every now and then, but this idea that I can keep improving is nice.
Mm-hmm. I actually really liked the mountaintop metaphor you just used, because in my brain I immediately said, oh, well, the writing process, or like the lifelong learner version, is like, let's just circumnavigate the globe. Let's just keep walking around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have bits where we're really comfortable with that terrain, and we're going to have bits where we're like, man, we're in a desert.
It's going to be hot.
We're going to be hot. We're in a desert right now.
It's still hot. It's October and it's like 70 degrees out.
It's getting cooler. We're hoping that fall is right around the corner.
But yeah, I also really like that metaphor because there's the valleys you might go through.
Mm-hmm. But we keep going. We keep learning. And, we know as graduate writers that there are tasks, there are activities that we feel really comfortable with. Maybe that's analysis, maybe that's building a lit review, kind of whatever you feel like you're good at, you're going to feel good at it. But there are also going to be documents and genres that are not your cup of tea or that you don't feel as comfortable with. And that's going to be more of a learning curve. It doesn't mean that you're not a good writer. It doesn't mean that you've slipped, that your skills have decreased or devolved. But, that there are just things that we need to continue to practice.
Well, and implicit, I think, in both of these metaphors. Is this a metaphor or no?
Did I
My
say
English
like?
professor.
Did I say like? If I said like, it's an analogy. If I said it is a mountain, it's a metaphor.
Okay.
So
I never remember the distinction.
I think I said like. So
that's
these
not
are
important to
these
what
are
we're doing
analogies.
here. But implicit in these metaphors or analogies, both of the journeys of whether it's climbing the mountain or going around the globe are more successful in a team with a group of people, right? And
absolutely.
I really, really like that you're part of a community of writers, and hopefully at whatever institution you're at, you've got those people around you, because I think that's a really valuable part of being a graduate student, and more specifically a graduate writer.
Find your fellowship.
Put your elven cloaks on.
Put your elven cloaks on. Find your fellowship. Who's going to bring their axe? Who's going to bring their bow?
And determine who's going to carry the ring, because that's the important one.
I think we're carrying. I think as graduate students, each of us are carrying the ring.
We're all our own ring bearer. Let's see. What is this next goal? So you may find yourself, and again, this is just kind of quotes from I think I got these from our FAQ kind of page about like what it is that we do. So you may find yourself paying more attention to your writing and writing more effectively and efficiently and thinking more confidently about yourself as a writer. And I even italicized that part, confidence. And that's a thing that, again, in working with graduate students, you'd be surprised. I deal with that or encounter that a lot more than you think, because, part of in grad school is like, I'm here for a reason and I'm here because I'm qualified, but I so often myself don't feel qualified and not always confident in my writing. And so one of the goals, and I've talked through people like, yes, your writing like is good. These ideas that you have are good. Mm-hmm. And again, this idea, we can improve on them, but that doesn't mean that they're not good. And so building confidence, and then, yes, using your time better or being more structured about using your time, those are like the tips and tricks I think that we're really good about trying to work in, or even just the accountability of working in a group. But the confidence piece, I think, is a really important aspect of what we do.
Absolutely. And I think confidence, and you already mentioned it, but we'll definitely talk about this in another episode. Imposter syndrome is rife in graduate school.
It's real.
It's real.
It's an everyday battle for me.
It's an everyday battle for me as well. And confidence doesn't necessarily mean that you as a writer are good at everything. And I think that's also like where the Writing Center comes in, is that part of our goal is to help you feel more confident in those messy bits. Okay, I don't know what to do here. I need to restructure something. I need to rethink this section. Feeling more confident about the middle stuff that is not clear, is not clean, is not polished. That's confidence too. There's something very powerful about saying this draft is a mess, but I'm going to figure out how to reorganize it and how to highlight my argument and how to make clear transition in a way that a lot of graduate students struggle with. It's that confidence in the murky bits.
Well, and it's even like you'll get a person, or this happens just a lot, where like they've stared at that page so much that of course it's hard to see kind of what's happening here, and you can come talk to one of us and might even just be a thing like, have you tried like moving this here?
Yeah.
And you can just see it click in their eyes and it all falls into place. And it's like, you see, and so it's, that opportunity you see, you had it there all along. It just, of course, it took a couple extra eyes because you've looked at it for hours and hours and hours.
It's been burned into your brain.
You see it when you sleep.
Okay, so our next goal as a writing center is, as educators, not editors, our goal is to help you revise and improve a project while you get a better sense of yourself as a writer. Similar to the last one, but the revising element, especially in graduate school, is where the writing center is the most helpful, because in graduate school, you are revising constantly. You're barely writing. And I think that's actually maybe something we can talk a lot about in this podcast. You're barely writing. You're revising constantly. It's so, personally for me, so much easier to write. It's impossible to revise.
It's so hard. And the thing I'm trying to improve on this year, but I wrote that because I meant what I wrote. I wanted to phrase it that particular way. Yeah. And so not even necessarily from like a critical perspective, but just like, okay, maybe it didn't come out perfectly. That initial time I wrote it down is a really tough skill. And I know we've talked about it a bit. It is often the case you get into graduate school, at least in the realms that we're involved in part because you're a good writer. And that's been a thing that, might have helped carry you through your undergraduate or master's career and to get to this PhD level when you're expected to do so much more revising, whether you try to get an article, if you're working on an article and you'll get comments back and they don't know who you are, so they might be actually kind of mean, like this kind of thing of like, it's good to revise.
Yeah.
It's not a skill natural to me anyways. And so we work on that a lot.
Yeah, we obviously work on that a lot. And, I think even this idea of the sense of yourself as a writer, there are a lot of graduate students who feel very confident about their writing coming in here. And then that confidence kind of wavers as they start to get feedback or they start to do these revisions. I know a lot of graduate students who
don't feel confident.
Don't feel confident as writers, don't even identify as writers. The writing portion of graduate school is the scariest bit. And I think that's really, really interesting about the work that we do in academia and in graduate school, because if students are coming in not realizing the workload that is going to be asked of them, then of course you're not going to feel confident. Of course you're not going to understand why you're participating in a particular type of practice that, like, this is just expected of your field, but I didn't know I was going to be doing this much writing. I talk to engineers about this all the time. They're like, oh, I didn't become an engineer to write all this stuff. My brother's a welding engineer. All he does is technical writing. All he does is technical writing. And that's a core part of his job, but he didn't know that going in, and he has never felt confident about his writing. I don't think it's important in graduate school to identify as a writer. I don't think that's valuable as you move forward. I think that the identity politics of graduate school are really weird, and the Writing Center is definitely a place where we're talking about writing. We're talking about being writers. We're talking about all these kind of labels. But you don't have to identify as a writer. We just want to help you with this task. We want to help you with your homework, basically.
Yeah, and it is interesting in the work we do because we kind of oscillate back and forth between let's just get you through the day, through the week, through the project, and then we'll also work with people on very long-term personal projects, dissertations, articles, what have you. And I don't know if yet I consider myself a writer, and maybe I never will. And honestly, it's a load off my back. Like,
that's totally fair.
I write for class, I write for the projects. There's an article that we'll be working on that I'm excited to write for, but I feel lucky to work in this space because I learned very quickly I don't need to tie who I am to this writing. Yeah, it's just an activity I do that I think is important and valuable, and I think it can be not your core, but still be a very valuable process. But I'm not staking everything of who I am on my writing. Yeah. And I'm very grateful. I've learned that early on. I'm sure it saved me a lot of heartache and consternation.
Oh, Nolan, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that.
Let's see. This next one talks about ideas that we've kind of already touched on, but this idea that we're not copy editors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is at times the expectations. I encounter this expectation in my work, not all the time, but enough that I think it's, we're not there to like cross your T's, dot your I's. We can offer that. We can help with that. We can help you polish a draft. That's for sure one of the spaces where I feel it's more, these are tips and tricks for yourself to edit your own paper.
Yeah.
If you really want me to look at like a paragraph or two or a part of the paper, I'm willing to kind of fine-tooth comb through it, but that it is these, as we say, higher order concerns that we're trying to work with on the whole.
The dynamic between copy editing and then consulting, what we do in the Writing Center, I will say it's a very gray line.
Yes.
And I think this is something we talk about with the consultants about all the time. It's something that in consultations and in meetings I have with students, like, we get into the nitty-gritty. However, the way that we as a Writing Center conceptualize copy editing is that it's anti-collaborative. What we want to do in the Writing Center is we want to work with you. We want to have a conversation with you about your writing. We want to ask you questions. We want you to clarify your ideas and to make those connections tighter and to kind of think about, okay, if this isn't maybe working for my reader, how else can I frame it? Copy editors are incredible. They do an amazing job of tweaking and clarifying, but copy editors, at least in this sphere, don't necessarily work with you. They work with your work. They take your document and they, quote unquote, polish it up. And I'm sure I'm going to get copy editors who are like, no, we actively
this isn't
work.
We're going to get emails.
We're going to get emails on our first episode. But, we're more educators. This is an educational space. We want you to learn. We want you to practice. We want you to think about how you are producing these ideas in a critical light. And so that's why we're here to help you. We're here to ask you the right questions and kind of get you thinking in those ways. But we want you to be in the driver's seat the whole time. We're a beautiful passenger princess. Mm-hmm. We're doing a great job navigating with you, but we want you to be driving.
We might change the radio station every now and then.
Yeah. We're going to bother you about the radio station, but that's valuable too.
Yeah, and and it's not that we don't ever engage in this. And like an example, maybe in my own practice where this comes up is like working with international students. I have in my bio that I worked in applied linguistics, so I feel like I do get a number of international writers who are very concerned about the grammar. And it's that thing that I say, like, if you're concerned about the grammar because it's not your native language, that's a very high concern. And so, I'll work through. I will offer those corrections, but because I have those skills, I'll also try to explain the grammar and teach the grammar and why this is the case. It's how the process looks.
Yep.
I think that is really definitional to what it is that we do.
Yeah, we are, if we're going, and this happens all the time in consultations, if you want to talk about grammar, we'll talk about grammar with you. We're maybe not going to be experts on that particular grammatical rule, but we'll look it up with you. We'll figure it out. We'll say, okay, this is what the rule says. If we're applying it here, maybe this is what this is going to look like. How else might you be able to frame the sentence based on the rule? So we're going to, again, it's that you're still in the driver's seat.
Discover things together.
Yeah. This especially happens with citation questions. So MLA.
I'm still learning.
MLA and APA questions.
I have to look that up.
I do too. These are entire manuals.
That change all the time.
That change almost every year. I'm not going to internalize MLA 8.
And you might not even work in amongst all the different styles. Yeah,
exactly. And especially in graduate school, it gets trickier because journals will have in-house styles. So you can't necessarily say this is like pure
APA 7.
Yeah, exactly. So it's maybe not pure APA. It's the in-house journal style. It's
Linguistics operates like that, I know, from time to time. Like very particular, like it's kind of APA, but it's not at times. Yeah. I'm just like, what's even going on here?
Yeah, and so we'll figure it out with you. And I think that's there's value in that. It's less scary to traverse the mountain with another person. And so
Where are the Sherpas?
We're Sherpas? I need a big winter coat.
Then, because you're the one who located it, do you maybe want to read the actual mission statement that we have? Because I think it's quickly states all these things that we've been kind of talking about.
Yes. So the KU Writing Center's purpose is to help students gain confidence, improve as writers, and achieve their academic goals by providing high-quality services in a supportive, inclusive environment. And I think we mean it. I think the work we do represents that goal, represents that mission statement. I work with a lot of students who feel much more confident with their work after, working with me for a few sessions. I'm sure that this has happened to you. There's just such relief on people's faces when it starts to click. And they're like, now I can do this myself.
And that's what makes the work. I mean, it's all worth it, but that's the payoff.
Ooh, it's such a good feeling. Yeah.
And I highlighted this in the mission statement. I think that inclusive part. Mm-hmm. And what that means, there is diversity in the Writing Center, and we have that, and I think we do a good job of achieving that relative to how diverse KU is as an institution. But even within the people that work there, within the majors represented at the Writing Center, yes, it's a lot of English type, humanities type folks, but there's a lot more than that. Yeah. We've got geography, geology kind of stuff.
Evolutionary
bio. There's this wealth of people who work at the Writing Center, and yes, it helps us meet the needs of multiple kinds of students, but it means we all think about writing in kind of our own ways. Our own disciplines have ways we go about this. And so, one thing we do is we encourage you to work with multiple people when you come and work with us because, it's useful to have all these different perspectives that are available there. And I think that's just really, really cool.
And we should probably say that we're actually now the Writing and Learning Center. Mm-hmm. So we've recently expanded the space in Anschutz Library. We are now working side by side with the ALC, so the Academic Learning Center. So content tutoring happens right next to writing consultations, and it can be really interesting to hear calculus right next to a conversation about thesis statements. Mm-hmm. And I think that just in many ways highlights the educational space that this is, that we know that writing isn't just about writing. It's about content mastery, and it's about understanding what you're trying to argue and how to think critically and all of these really important skills alongside being able to do derivatives.
And heck, even more than that, I know I was talking to you about it. I've got a person I'm working with on some Russian language stuff, which is cool because I have the skills that I can handle that, and it's really fun to work with. But we have Spanish language writing consultants that we're trying out this year. So even linguistic diversity, which I care a lot about, I think is really, really valuable.
I think that's really important, and I'm really glad that we've got the Spanish consultants. So Louise and Manuel have been recently added to the team. They are incredible consultants. I wish they had more consultations because they're great.
They might have to come on an episode.
Yeah, we should have them on an episode. That'd be great. But they really care about these bilingual spaces. It's Manuel who's been working with a student who's a native speaker of Spanish, but she's writing a dissertation in Alps. So she's her dissertation's in English, and what helps is talking out her ideas in Spanish with Manuel, and then them kind of trying to navigate how do we say this in English. Yeah. And that's really, really cool.
And the process of translation I think about a lot, and what is your goal? It's just a really interesting space, and that wasn't a thing we could offer in the past, and it's really awesome that we've expanded in that way.
I'm really hoping to at least,
I hope it stays.
Yeah, I hope it stays. I hope we also can start to expand our multilingual support. I do think that is one thing. I know I am not an expert in multilingual writing, and I wish I were. I wish I could better support that contingency of students. But we do what we can, knowing that, unfortunately, you have to write in academic.
There's this academic English pressure on all of us.
Yeah, and academic English is such a...
I'm sure we'll also talk about that a lot.
I was going to say, it's such a monolith, but at the same time, it's absolutely not.
It's content specific. It's genre specific.
Sometimes it's advisor specific.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Will your advisor let you say swear words in your dissertation? I don't know.
It really has been a space for me to kind of just slow down and think about what the heck am I even doing? Why am I writing this? What are the goals? And we even talk about this at Helps. Like, yes, it's cool if you can publish a paper out of class, but every now and then it's just valuable to practice writing in class, but not have the pressure of having it be this perfect article thing that you can get out of a class. And so taking that time to sit and think about your writing, reflect on your writing with other people engaged in writing has been really, really valuable to my experience thus far as a graduate student.
Yeah. I think it's so important that we do have these like quiet little spaces of just talking about small sections. Often I see graduate students, and again, no fault of their own. They know what they need, and so they have high expectations for what they're going to get out of meeting with us. They're like, I want you to read my 30-page chapter.
I only have an hour.
And it's not that I don't think reading all 30 pages is important, but I often think that you might be getting the same comments on all 30 pages, and really what we need to do is just focus on a few so that you can start to pick up on your own habits and your own patterns and notice
and grow and apply them yourselves.
Yeah, and grow and apply them yourselves and think about, okay, I know when I make this move, I need to do X. Or, when I end a paragraph in this way, I need to be clear about my transition. There are things and strategies that are important to discuss in these small, slow spaces so that you can start to see how they apply throughout the other work that you do. It doesn't have to be we read through 30 pages in one session.
Yeah, and I know I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot. Writing is just really powerful, though. It's this really cool thing, and yes, we're like nerds who care about writing, but like
we're nerds who care about writing.
It's magical. You can talk to people across time and space, and you can read people who have been dead for 200 years, and you know what they said and thought and felt. Like there's this whole community that you enter into when you're writing. We're just all bards.
We're all beautiful little bards trying to
weave magic into the world.
Through our words and through how we describe things, and I think that's great. I guess context for this. Nolan and I play Dungeons & Dragons. We play in the same game together.
And I'm sure we'll talk about it on this podcast.
Sure we'll talk about it on this
I think
podcast.
we have an episode planned where we actually want to talk about like graduate play, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, we'll have some fun. I am excited to have that very playful conversation about, what is fun about what we do and like how do we make it fun. But going back to kind of this magic of it, I think that's so powerful, but I also think that I don't want graduate students to feel like, oh, well, everything I do now has to be powerful and has to
live up to that standard of magic.
Yeah, live up to the standard of magic. Man, everything is magic. The mundane is magic.
Its existence is magic.
Its existence is magic. The fact that you can type, you can clickety-clack on a keyboard.
Technology.
And the letters that you're writing are going onto a screen and you can read them, that's magic. If you write, I love puppies, incredible. You wrote the greatest sentence in the world.
No, and I really like the way I said it. The mundane is magic.
Yeah.
And yeah, because again, going back to those pressures in grad school, you have to be the best. It's a very competitive space. But this idea of entering into your own kind of area that you care about is valuable because you care about it.
Yeah.
If, 20 people read your article, awesome. That's 20 more than wouldn't have read it had you never written that article. So yeah, I really believe in this idea that the mundane, the average, the ordinary is so magical because it builds up this whole condition that we're a part of.
And as much as academic English can feel very rigorous and
constricting
in a lot of ways, I do think there's a fun flexibility to it.
It's fun to play with the rules.
And granted, that does mean that you have to get kind of comfortable with the rules. But as soon as you start to notice the way that the rhythm of academic English allows for certain kinds of impact, you know that based on how you're structuring something, someone's going to read your topic sentence. They're basically going to ignore the middle bits, and they're going to read the conclusion sentence. All right, I'll play that game.
Okay, I see you.
Let me write a really good transition. topic sentence. Let me write a really good concluding sentence. Let me put all of my impact there. The middle sentences can just be average.
Yeah.
That's okay. All they have to do is support your argument.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. Writing is just really, really cool, and obviously we think it's really, really cool and really valuable. To think about it, and again, as our notes say, it's just an integral part of what graduate student life is, whether you expected that or not.
Yeah.
Coming into it. So hopefully this is a space where all of us, the community that we hope to grow related to the podcast, can just engage with these kinds of ideas, these concepts.
Yeah, we have a lot of...
We have so many episodes planned.
We have so many episodes planned. We will keep you all posted with regard to production schedules. Just a couple of notes on kind of what we are thinking of discussing next. So for the rest of the fall term, we've got about 5 more episodes planned. Our next conversation is going to be something we've already started to talk about, which is this difference between consulting versus coaching. So we're going to kind of talk about some of the differences we see there, some of the overlap we see in our strategies, and kind of discuss the value of each. So that's our next one. We are also preparing for our, what are we calling these? Are they our lit review episodes?
Yeah, I like the idea of calling them a lit review.
Yeah.
These kinds of, not necessarily, but in a way, research-oriented episodes where each of us will look at some academic articles, maybe some academic adjacent articles, and yeah, kind of discussing what scholarship talks about these things. So talking about first-generation graduate students, what does that mean? Do we have a good definition of that?
That's a good question.
So yeah, those will be maybe a bit more academic, but still hopefully that kind of free-flowing, fun discussion, but kind of grounded in what's out there in terms of academic research.
Yeah. And then for the last 3 of the fall, we're going to kind of do some easier episodes for us, but this is just Writing Center 101. Here we have 3 different types of consultations. We've got in-person consultations, video conferencing consultations, and we have what's called e-tutoring, which is our like asynchronous.
Remote, yeah.
So we're going to have 3 episodes kind of deep diving into those modalities.
The pros and cons.
Yeah.
Which one I like the most.
Which one we like the most. I know which one we don't like. Which... That's a personal preference. Please
just come to the Writing Center.
Please just come to the
We just want you to come.
We just want to talk to you is really what all of this is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll talk about sort of each type of consultation for themselves, kind of focusing on pros and cons. And that will shape the rest of the fall. We've got more episodes planned for the spring.
Like 20 locked and loaded.
We've got 20 locked and loaded. They're ready to go. We're so excited. And then we'll have a fun a video episode.
Yeah, we're hoping to include some audio or the video with the audio.
Yeah.
Maybe a PowerPoint presentation party episode.
PowerPoint party. For those of you who don't know what a PowerPoint party is, it's you and your close friends get together and you each create a 5-minute PowerPoint on a hill you would die on.
Just a niche that you and like 12 other people care about.
It could be literally anything.
I'm expecting an anime-related one from you.
You will not be disappointed then. I'm literally thinking of One Piece. Anyway, so that we'll have a fun little PowerPoint party episode, and I think we have that planned for the end of spring.
Yeah, and so all it is to say, we hope to grow the community, and for those of you who are wanting to come along on this ride, we hope it's a good time, and we're really excited about the project.
Yeah, we're so excited. We'll also be, interested in having guests on.
For sure.
So people from the Writing Center, but also graduate students from the KU community. Love to talk to you. Love to kind of pick your brain, get your experiences with writing at this level. So yeah.
And yeah, I hope to get like a Twitter, as long as Twitter continues to exist, a Twitter up and running.
Yes.
So there's like community engagement,
I refuse to call it I refuse to call it the other name, so it's still Twitter.
So yeah, we'll just be hoping to meet you all.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Nolan.
Oh, it's been fun.
It's been super fun.
Really good time.
I'm really excited about this. All right. Happy writing, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.